Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Talker Story Class. What if I told you that the birthplace of everything we call civilization, the place where the human story actually begins, is Africa? I know. Sometimes when people talk about Africa on TV, they only show lions and zebras, or they show jungles. They don't show the universities, the castles, or the kings and queens. We are going to uncover the secret history that a lot of textbooks rush past. We are going to look at why Africa is the mother and father of civilization. Now, that's a big word. Civilization basically means when people stop just surviving, like hunting for food and sleeping in caves, and start building. It's when they build cities, create laws, learn to write, make art, and study the stars. For a long time, history books tried to say that this smart stuff started in places like Greece or Rome in Europe. But here is the secret. Long before Greece was even a glimmer on the map, people in Africa were already doing incredible things. Let's start with a really cool artifact called the Ishango bone. Imagine a simple bone, the fibula of a baboon, that is over 20,000 years old. It was found near the border of Uganda and Congo. Now, it looks like just a stick, right? But when you look closer, there are scratch marks on it. And these aren't just random doodles. They are grouped together in a very specific way. Mathematicians, people who love numbers, have studied this bone and they realized it's a calculator. It shows prime numbers and multiplication. This proves that African people were doing math and advanced counting thousands of years before the famous mathematicians in Europe were even born. Now, let's travel north to a place you might have heard of, Egypt. I hope you have heard or you've seen a picture of a pyramid. Here is the trick that some history books play on you. They talk about Egypt as if it's totally separate from Africa. They treat it like it's its own little island. But Egypt is in Africa. The people who built those pyramids, the Sphinx, and those massive temples were African people. They called their land Kemet, which means the black land, because of the rich, dark soil from the Nile River that allowed them to grow food. And let's talk about what they did there. We aren't just talking about stacking big rocks. The Great Pyramid is an engineering miracle. It is lined up almost perfectly with the directions north, south, east, and west.
To do that, you need to know geometry and astronomy, the study of the stars, really, really well. And did you know they invented paper? Well, kind of. Before people were carving heavy stones to write messages, the Egyptians took a plant called papyrus that grew by the river and turned it into sheets they could write on. They created ink. They created a written language called hieroglyphics. Imagine that. While people in many parts of Europe were still wearing animal skins and trying to stay warm by a fire, Africans along the Nile were writing down poetry, medical textbooks, and history. Speaking of medicine, this is one of the most amazing parts. We have found ancient medical books written on that papyrus scrolls that describe how to fix broken bones, how to stitch up wounds, and even how to perform surgery on the brain. They knew about the pulse, your heartbeat, and how it connected to the rest of the body. They were the world's first doctors. But let's move away from Egypt, because another thing they won't tell you is that civilization was happening all over the continent, not just by the Nile River. Let's fly over to West Africa, to a place called Mali. Now, I want you to picture a king. His name was Mansa Musa. History tells us that Mansa Musa was likely the richest human being who has ever lived, richer than the guys who own Amazon or Tesla today. He had so much gold that when he traveled, he gave it away to people in the streets. But here is the important part. He didn't just care about gold, he cared about books. In the city of Timbuktu, which is in Mali, there was a huge university called the University of Sankore. This was hundreds of years ago. Students would travel from all over the world to come to Timbuktu. And what were they studying? They weren't just learning to read. They were studying law, religion, astronomy, and mathematics. Timbuktu had libraries that were filled with hundreds of thousands of handwritten books. Think about that for a second. Sometimes people try to say that African history is only oral history, just stories told around a campfire. While storytelling is important, that is not the whole truth. In West Africa, they had massive libraries. They had scholars who were writing books while knights in Europe were still fighting with swords in the mud. And it wasn't just in the north or the west. Let's go down south to a place called Zimbabwe. It was a massive city with huge walls made of granite blocks.
Now, think about your Lego sets. When you build a wall with Legos, they snap together. But when you build a wall with real stones, usually you need something sticky like cement or mortar to hold them together, right? The builders of Great Zimbabwe were so skilled, they cut the rocks so perfectly that they didn't use any cement. They just stacked them. And the walls held together because of perfect balance and friction. These walls are still standing today, hundreds of years later. They are proof that there was a powerful, organized kingdom there that traded with people as far away as China. We know this because archaeologists found pottery from China and coins from the Middle East inside the ruins of Great Zimbabwe. That means these African people were connected to the whole world, trading and doing business like modern international companies do today. So, why does this matter? Why am I telling you this? Well, for a long time, about 300 or 400 years ago, people from Europe and later America wanted to take things from Africa. They wanted to take the gold, the resources, and sadly, even the people. To make themselves feel better about doing that, they had to tell a story. They had to pretend that the people in Africa weren't smart, that they didn't have cities, and that they didn't have history. It's easier to treat someone badly if you pretend they don't have a civilization. So, they wrote history books that left out the libraries of Timbuktu. They wrote books that pretended the Egyptians weren't really African. They ignored the Ishango bone and the walls of Great Zimbabwe. They painted a picture of a continent that was dark and empty, waiting for others to come and turn on the lights. But now, thanks to science, archaeology, and honest historians, we are turning those lights on ourselves. We can look at the evidence. We can see the iron smelting tools in Nigeria that show Africans were making high-quality metal tools thousands of years ago. We can look at the astronomy sites in Kenya where ancient people tracked the stars with perfect accuracy. When we understand that civilization started in Africa, it changes how we see the world. It's like finding the missing piece of a puzzle. If you try to build a puzzle without the centerpiece, the whole picture looks wrong. Africa is that centerpiece. It means that writing, math, architecture, medicine, and agriculture didn't just magically appear in Europe. The seeds were planted in Africa.
They grew there first. And then, as people moved and traveled, they carried that knowledge with them to the rest of the world. So, the next time someone talks about the ancient world and only mentions Greece or Rome, you can raise your hand. You can be the teacher for a moment. It is important to know this because it reminds us that genius, intelligence, and creativity don't belong to just one group of people or one continent. But we have to give credit where credit is due. The spark of human brilliance was first struck in Africa. I want you to leave here today with a new map in your head. When you look at the shape of Africa on a globe, don't just see a shape. I want you to see the busy markets of Timbuktu with their books and gold. I want you to see the astronomers in Egypt watching the stars to build the pyramids. I want you to see the stonemasons in Zimbabwe fitting rocks together perfectly. You are the generation that gets to know the truth. You don't have to rely on the old stories that left things out. You have the whole story now. And the story is that humanity and civilization itself was born in Africa. It is a proud history, a deep history, and most importantly, it is our shared history. You might just find the answer leads you back to the African continent. Have a great day, everyone, and I will catch up with you in another story.